Canada is one of the richest countries in the world, but families are lining up at food banks. Parents are skipping meals so their kids can eat, and people with full-time jobs still can't pay rent. This isn't bad luck. This is a broken system. So how did one of the wealthiest nations on Earth become a place where survival feels impossible?
And don't tell me there's no money for it, because there is. We paid for it. They took my entire child tax benefit. I want to know how the hell people in Canada are even living.
I don't know, man. I just don't know what to do anymore.
I've had to move to a different apartment. I've had to sell my car.
Please, start hiring again.
I go to the store and I see deodorant for $20. Who are we deodorizing?
Do you think housing is still affordable in Canada?
No.
Canada, one of the richest countries in the world, a nation built on opportunity, equality, and the promise that hard work pays off. But somewhere along the way, that promise was broken. Families are drowning in debt, seniors are skipping meals, parents are working 60 hours a week and still wondering how they'll pay the bills. How did we get here? How did a country once known for stability and fairness turn into a place where millions of people can't even afford to live the life they were promised? We're told the economy is doing great, that unemployment is low, that GDP is strong, that Canada is booming. But what good is a booming economy when the people who built it can't survive it? When every grocery run feels like a financial test, when rent eats half your income, and when saving for the future feels like a fantasy. This isn't just numbers on a chart, it's real life. It's everyday Canadians falling through the cracks while billion-dollar corporations celebrate record profits. Today we're pulling back the curtain, because it's time someone said it plainly. Canada is rich, but its people are broke. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, if you believe the truth matters, subscribe and join the movement. This is Canadian Rant, and we're giving the struggle a voice.
How the fuck does this make any sense? Our people in Canada are losing jobs while we sit at the third largest oil reserve in the world. But our fabulous government keeps fucking it up. Hear me out. Canada, 40 million people. Oil, gas, mining, forestry, diamonds, hydro. Resources everywhere. Now check this out. Saudi Arabia. Similar population, fewer resources. But they give their citizens oil checks every month. Zero income tax, zero sales tax. And national debt that's a fraction of ours. Meanwhile in Canada, $2.1 trillion in debt. 40+% income tax, 13% sales tax. And layoffs hitting every single industry. This isn't bad luck, this is bad leadership. Countries with less are thriving and we're drowning in debt, taxes, and unemployment. If you really think it's bad now, wait until we see mortgage renewals hit. When banks tighten up the lending and our jobs keep bleeding up. This is not sustainable anymore. And if you're sitting back and watching it collapse, it's on you. Build a second stream of income now while you still can and while you still have some type of income coming in. Because once shit really hits the fan, you're cooked. And this video isn't out there to make you scared. It's to make you aware and prepared.
All these countries that are going through heavy inflation right now, it's not a place you really want
But
to
not
go.
everybody's broke, right?
No, of course not.
It's just the...
And I'm not saying that the whole world is going to be broke, but the middle class is going to be broke, which is going to cause the economy to completely collapse. Because if the middle class, that is our lifeline.
Yeah.
Our lifeblood. I mean, without that, we have nothing. And if you take that away, and that's the goal of the elites. That's, again, I always look at who controls the world and what's their goal. Their goal is to completely collapse the middle class, to completely inflate the dollar weight.
Why do the elites want to collapse the middle class? What's the goal?
They want to control the world, and the easiest way to control the world is if everybody's dependent on the government.
Sure. Okay. I don't think they want to collapse the middle class. They want to control the middle class.
Which the easiest way to control the middle collapse is to have a full-on socialist government where the middle class is dependent on the government.
Right, but it won't be full-on socialism, in my opinion.
I don't think it will either.
It'll be
I think that's their goal, though.
It'll be the Chinese version, which is
communism.
That's as bad as it gets.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but something is seriously broken in Canada right now. And honestly, I'm pissed off about it, and you should be too. We live in one of the wealthiest, most resource-rich countries on the planet, yet somehow regular Canadian families are drowning. So tell me how that makes sense. We've got more fresh water and land than almost anywhere else in the world, and yet grocery prices are skyrocketing. We've got more trees than any other country on earth, yet the price of lumber is so high that young Canadian families can't even dream of building a home anymore. And don't get me started on energy. Like, we sit on some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world, but we pay some of the highest fuel prices on the planet. Meanwhile, other countries are leveraging our natural resources to build their wealth, while we tax Canadian families into the ground and pretend like everything's fine. But it's not fine, not even close. I used to lie awake at night worrying about this stuff, worrying about my mortgage, worrying about my bills, worrying about how I was going to give my 7-year-old daughter the future she deserves when the middle class is disappearing right in front of my eyes. But then it hit me, like, waiting for the government to fix this mess is a dead-end road, right? Nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming in on a white horse and is going to save you, right? That's when I decided I had to take back control of my own financial future, and I turned to digital marketing. And I'm not talking about some get-rich-quick garbage. I'm talking about learning a real beginner-friendly skill set that anyone can master, like how to build a simple online business, how to leverage platforms like TikTok to grow an audience, how to create systems that actually generate income even when you're sleeping. I didn't need to be tech savvy. I didn't need a business degree. I just needed to decide that I was done letting someone else control my own financial future. And listen, I get it. I'm not saying it's easy, right? But it is simple. And the best part is, you don't have to wait for anybody's permission to start. I did this while working full-time, raising a family, and trying to keep my head above water. If I can figure this shit out, so can you. So look, if you are ready to stop relying on a broken system, just comment ready below. Follow me and stick around, because on October 1st, I'm laying everything out step by step.
Just need to vent a little bit. I feel like ever since somebody left garbage on top of the stairs and I fell down from it, life has been kind of hard, and my country government has treated me like crap ever since. It's frustrating dealing with all the crap that the government makes you go through when you're in a bad state of life to begin with. Like, I just don't understand. I'm Canadian. I'm a born Canadian. Why is my government and country treating me like crap? I broke my back and none of it was my fault. But they sure make you feel like you purposely did it. And that you're just a lazy person who refuses to go to work. I'm so sick of this. I dealt with it with my son Mitch because he has Downs, and now I deal with it because I am permanently disabled. This country needs to change. We need a better government. We need a better country. We need to go back to the proud Canada we used to have. It's so frustrating.
We should be the richest country in the world, by the way. We have the second biggest land mass, the third biggest proven oil reserves, the sixth biggest lithium reserves, the biggest uranium and potash reserves, the biggest oceanic coastline of any country in the world, 154 million acres of farmland. We have an abundance of energy that can power these massive data centers, and we have the cold weather to cool them. We have 41 million highly educated, hardworking people ready to get the job done. So why aren't we the richest country in the world? Why have we lost $500 billion to the Americans and had the worst economic growth of all our competitors over the last 10 years? Why has our per capita GDP gone up so slow? In fact, the American per capita GDP has gone up 40 times faster than Canada's over the last decade. Well, that is the lost Liberal decade of blocking, taxing, and driving away business. A decade during which the Liberals were in power and Mark Carney was, for half of that time, the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. The reason is that partly we block everything in this country. We get in our own way. It takes 17 years to get a mine approved in Canada. It takes much longer here than in the rest of the world. Second slowest permits in the OECD. In the first 5 years of the Liberal government, they blocked $176 billion of resource and energy projects. They were cancelled mostly due to government obstacles. These projects would have made us more self-reliant and independent from the Americans. For example, the Liberal government in Ottawa opposed the LNG Canada project in Saguenay, which would have brought Canadian natural gas to the Europeans. They opposed the Energy East pipeline, which would have brought 1 million barrels of Western oil to the St. John refinery to ship over to Europe, also breaking Putin's grip on Europe and allowing us to go around Donald Trump and the Americans. The company canceled that project after spending $1 billion on getting approved. The Liberal government suddenly changed the rules in the middle of the game. Justin Trudeau also vetoed the Northern Gateway pipeline, which would have taken about 500,000 barrels a day from Alberta to the Pacific to go over to Asia, again allowing us to go around the Americans. And Mike Carney testified that he supported Mr. Trudeau's decision to block that pipeline. Carney opposed pipelines in Canada while he invested in pipelines in the Middle East. He supported a carbon tax on our Canadian industry and consumers, all while his company, Brookfield, invested in American coal. And just 6 days after Donald Trump threatened tariffs on Canada, Mark Carney backed down and moved his company headquarters from Toronto to New York, bringing Canadian jobs to America.
So I want to talk about why the Canadian economy and the Canadian housing market is so broken. And before you're like, not this guy again, just stick with me. There's some updates that I think are really interesting, and this will be a little bit longer, but I think it'll be worth sticking around. So Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem the other day expressed his concern about renters and credit card debt. Basically, renters are, in some cases, reaching like 90% of their credit utilization rate when you're really supposed to only be around 30%. And it's clearly because they're bearing the brunt of, the cost of living crisis in Canada. Coincidentally, literally, I think like a day later, Ricardo Tranian with the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives published this and is showing that the rental rates are increasing faster than wages in most of the provinces in Canada. You can have a look here and see your own province. Now, that's not universally true for every province, but it's definitely a trend. And keep in mind, this is just the last year. This is not like a long-term thing. So it's definitely increasing. Now, coming back to Tiff Macklem, he notes that the stress that renters are facing in terms of increased credit usage is not the same stress faced by mortgage holders. In fact, mortgage holders have only seen a modest increase in their financial stress. So clearly renters are bearing the brunt of this, right? Homeowners are relatively okay. But the irony of like Macklem having concern for renters here, it's a bit like the hot dog meme from I Think You Should Leave. Like, who's responsible for this? Now, this is where people come in and they say, well, the reason for this is there's too many immigrants coming to Canada, or we don't have enough housing, so there's not enough supply, and so there's competition over places to live, and that's why rents are going up. Those are definitely factors, but here is the main driving force. This is from Better Dwelling. Again, they just published this a few days ago. We're seeing that the share of people buying houses in Canada who already own multiple homes has increased. It's now up to 30.5%. Now, why are they doing this? There's a few reasons. First of all, they're listening to our political leaders like the Prime Minister, for example, who are making very clear and obvious overtures to say, hey, we will ensure that housing prices never drop in this country, that prices have to retain their value. So clearly, if you're getting into the real estate game, you're pretty happy to know that the entire federal government has your back. And that's likely to continue if Trudeau loses the election and Pierre Poilievre gets into place. And Trudeau, by the way, is very true to his word here, because he just, recently unveiled a policy that this December, first-time homebuyers will be able to access a 30-year mortgage as opposed to the 25-year mortgage, meaning that they'll have smaller monthly carrying costs, which in theory makes housing more affordable. But in fact, that extra 5 years means they're going to pay a lot more in interest. But the underlying thing here is that by having that option to have a 30-year mortgage, it means that you can buy a house that's at the existing or even higher price than it is right now, right? So this is ensuring that the market is not affected. Because the simple truth in Canada is that it is vastly easier right now for someone who already owns a home to purchase another home, to have the assets and the ability to pay the inflated housing prices in this country. So a lot of multiple homeowner investors are like, yes, I want in. I want to expand my portfolio. but they still need to rent their places to people in order to afford the carrying costs. And that falls on the back of working people who need to rent. And right now in Canada, there's zero non-market solutions for housing. So we're entirely relying on market forces to spur on new home builds. So developers are only going to build homes if they know they're going to have a buyer who can afford the price. And the only buyers who can afford prices right now are multiple homeowner investors. And so a lot of right-wing politicians and even centrists believe that in order to spur on an increase in home development, we have to get rid of rent control rules because these multiple homeowner investors aren't going to want to get into the game unless there are people to rent to take their carrying costs for them. So there's political pressure at all levels to get rid of existing rent controls. If that happens, the disparity on this chart that you see here from Trainian is just going to get worse. So what's the final takeaway from all this? Well, to use a really hackneyed analogy, you can imagine overpopulation as the sort of gasoline. You can imagine lack of home supply as the kind of motor oil. But the engine for the housing crisis in Canada is the financialization of housing, is the mortgage system that we have right now, is the market system that we've put into place. And the irony, again, of people like Tiff Macklem expressing their concern for renters is that it's his cutting of interest rates that causes the inflation of housing prices vastly more than any actual factors with regard to supply or population. So until we actually come up with non-market solutions for housing, like public housing, there's a whole bunch of other things which I can get into in another TikTok, although I've talked about these things endlessly. This problem is not going to go away. And this thing where multiple homeowner investors rely on the labor of the working class to cover their carrying costs, it can't go on forever like this. We're already hitting a limit. If credit utilization rates are already like 90+%, that's just going to get worse. These people are going to start to declare bankruptcy. There's going to be suddenly massive amounts of people who can't pay their monthly rent. And then the threads start to pull.
Let's talk about housing affordability and how this has become such a problem in Canada. And usually, and this is sort of the point where I want to talk about, is not necessarily about interest rates. And people are usually revolving around the interest rate situation. And I know it is one factor that actually affects it. However, there is a major situation going on, and that is the current policies that we have in Canada, which are making the situation worse. And it has to do with current immigration policies and the job market altogether. If we talk about the youth unemployment, which has become such a problem, is almost 15% right now, and the share of people working is at its lowest level since the last 25 years, outside of COVID, of course. Meanwhile, almost 400,000 Canadians have been stuck searching for work for over 2 years. So people are actually looking for a job, 400,000 people looking for a job over the last 2 years. That is clearly telling us that this has become a major issue when it comes to affordability. When wages are flat or falling, how are first-time home buyers supposed to save for a down payment, for example? Not only have their incomes approved for a mortgage, but also save for a down payment. And also, affordability isn't just about home prices. It's about income stability, as I'm saying, and right now, policy. Current government policy, unfortunately, isn't supporting that. I don't want to get political here. I am just outlining the situation that's going on right now. Now, on the supply side, Ontario has fewer homes being built today than during the Great Recession. So housing supply is also a major issue, and that is not news. We already been knowing this for quite some time. But now there's a little bit of a shift involved because we now, and we have learned that there isn't such a shortage of supply. The situation is also now getting worse because they are building more purpose-built rentals instead of building actual homes for ownership. And it has become quite a disaster. We keep boosting population targets when we talk about immigration. and without boosting housing starts. And basic math, more people, fewer homes, you know how it works. Now, governments also approve intakes without fixing zoning, permits, or infrastructure to support the actual building. And that directly squeezes affordability. So even if there are projects ongoing, the actual policy is not there, and the red tape is actually blocking most of those projects and making things even worse. Now, let's talk about temporary labor policies. There's the temporary foreign worker program. Nearly 75% of these positions are low-wage jobs competing directly with young and working-class Canadians. Nothing against immigrants, but aren't we supposed to favor Canadians right now for the time being, at least unless things get a little better? Corporations save on labor costs, but Canadians lose stable jobs. So corporations are getting tax breaks out of the temporary foreign worker program. However, on the other hand, the youth is actually suffering. And without secure growing incomes, you don't qualify for a mortgage, of course. So instead of fixing wages and productivity, policies are importing more low-wage labor while Canadians face stagnant and rising living costs. And that is a broken system. Now, why does this matter for mortgages? Of course, mortgage affordability is based out of income growth, stable employment, and housing supply. All these three are being undermined right now. Wages aren't growing, unemployment is rising, supply is collapsing, yet policy continues to pump demand instead of fixing fundamentals. And that is also why every stress test feels impossible to pass, almost impossible, and why buyers are being shut out of the market. Now, just to summarize here, the whole idea is that if we actually want affordability, we need Canadian jobs for Canadian workers. Serious investment in housing supply, maybe steer away from purpose-built rentals for now, and policies that support income growth. Well, isn't that complicated? For sure it is. But the point is that that is way more important than bigger immigration targets.
You guys do realize that part of the reason why Americans are so much richer than Canadians is because they don't neuter their own economy, right? Like, it blows my mind seeing Canadians complain about their standard of living despite the fact that they continue to vote for parties and policies that are undermining that standard of living. Our federal and provincial governments have a tendency to demonize resource industries like oil and gas, mining, and forestry, despite the fact that they're some of the cleanest and well-regulated in the world, and that those industries end up raising the standard of living for everybody when they're operating properly. Meanwhile, other countries like America understand this, and they allow these industries to work within their borders in a way that makes everybody richer. Canada LNG is a perfect example of this, by the way. The project that created tens of thousands of jobs in BC, in tandem with the Haisla First Nation, is helping pull that nation out of poverty. It is bringing billions into the Canadian economy that ends up allowing for other industries to operate. You cannot continue to complain about your low standard of living if you continue to vote for things that are going to cause that low standard of living to happen. Don't allow boomer hippies and Greenpeace activists to destroy your way of life.
They call it the Great Canadian Dream. A good job, a home, a peaceful life. But for millions, that dream is turned into a daily survival fight. Every month, more families are falling behind. Not because they're lazy, not because they're careless, but because the system is rigged against them. The cost of living has exploded, but wages haven't kept up. Groceries cost more than ever, but corporate profits hit record highs. Politicians keep saying they understand, but nothing ever changes. So we ask again, how can one of the richest countries on earth have so many struggling citizens? Maybe because Canada's wealth isn't measured by the people anymore. It's measured by corporations, markets, and those who profit from the rest of us just trying to survive. But here's the truth they don't want to hear. Canadians are waking up. People are tired of pretending everything's fine. Tired of smiling through the stress. Tired of being told it's their fault when the whole system is broken. Every time you watch, share, or comment, you're doing something powerful. You're breaking the silence. You're standing with every Canadian who's struggling but refuses to give up. So don't stay quiet. Share this video. Subscribe if you haven't. Because this channel isn't just about complaining. It's about uniting. It's about shining a light on what's really happening in this country. One voice becomes 100. 100 becomes 1,000. And when enough of us speak up, they can't ignore us anymore. This is the real Canada. Not the one in the headlines. Not the one in the speeches. But the one lived by the people. I'm not here to give you hope. I'm here to remind you that you're not alone. This is your voice, your story, your truth. This is Canadian Rant, because the truth deserves to be heard.